Hey, this is Pastor Bunjee Garrett, and I want to take this opportunity to present you with another word of encouragement. Now, it was last month when the United Nations tweeted a photo of the statue that they just set up right outside the UN headquarters in New York City. The statue was actually donated by the government of Oaxaca, Mexico. And according to the UN, this gigantic statue is called the Guardian of International Peace and Safety. Now, it should be noted that the UN described this stationary guardian as a fusion of a jaguar and an eagle. And yet there are some who insist that this strange statue actually looks more like the beast, which is described in the book of Revelation. It's actually in Revelation chapter 13. There the Apostle John writes, "I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rising up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his horns 10 crowns, and on his heads a blasphemous name." Now the beast, which I saw, was like a leopard. His feet were like the feet of a bear, and his mouth like the mouth of a lion. The dragon gave him his power, his throne, and great authority. Now, with these verses in mind, it's no wonder that one reporter named Michael Snyder, he decided to write an article which he titled, "The UN Just Put Up a Giant Statue in New York That Resembles a Beast Described in the Book of Revelation." Now, this article, which can be found at themostimportantnews.com, well, this article includes the following comparison, and I quote, "Jaguars and leopards have builds that are at least somewhat similar, and so I guess one could make an argument that the body of the statue resembles either one. As for the feet, they do seem to resemble those of a bear, and it is noteworthy that the feet are totally different color from the rest of the body. When it comes to the mouth, to me, it looks more like the mouth of a lion rather than the mouth of a jaguar." And then he provides photos for comparison. And then he writes, "As for the wings, I suppose that it could be argued that they were modeled after the wings of eagles, but in ancient lore, dragons were also reported to have wings, and it's interesting to note that a dragon is specifically mentioned in Revelation chapter 13. Now, as we consider this comparison between the beast found in Revelation 13 and the UN statue, which was recently unveiled, I should take a moment to remind you that the beast that John describes in the book of Revelation is actually an amalgamation of the beasts that the prophet Daniel described in a vision that he records during the days of the Babylonian captivity. It was actually in Daniel chapter 7 where we find the prophet Daniel. He's describing the dreams and the visions that he had while lying on his bed. And in one of those dreams, he saw 4 great beasts rising up from the sea, each, one different from the other. The first, according to Daniel, was like a lion. The second was like a bear. The third, like a leopard with 4 heads. And then the fourth beast was a dreadful, terrible, exceedingly strong monster, which Daniel found difficult to describe. Now, for the sake of clarity, it'll help you to know that the first beast, which was like a lion, well, that represents the Babylonian Empire. The second beast, which was like a bear, represents the Medo-Persian Empire. The third beast, which was like a leopard with 4 heads, which rose up and then conquered the bear, well, that's the Grecian Empire, which rose to power under the leadership of Alexander the Great. But then after his death, the Grecian Empire was then divided up between 4 generals who served under Alexander the Great. Finally, the fourth beast, which Daniel had a difficult time describing, well, this actually points us to the Roman Empire, which was actually never conquered. Now, with all of that in mind, we must not fail to realize that the beast that we find in Revelation 13 is actually an amalgamation of all the beasts that we find there in Daniel chapter 7. That's right. It's a single beast which includes elements of the Babylonian, Medo-Persian, Grecian, and Roman empires. And what this means is that the beast found in Revelation chapter 13 is actually a representation of the United Nations. That's what it does. It represents all of the nations of the world. And with that being the case, we shouldn't be surprised by the fact that the UN statue, which is similar to the beast found in the book of Revelation, has been described by the UN as the guardian of international peace and safety. And while this statue is seen as a symbol of international peace and security, I can't help but to wonder, is this statue actually designed to depict the rise of the Antichrist? Now, with this question in mind, I should remind you of John's description of this beast. It's, in Revelation 13, where John tells us that this beast has 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his horns 10 crowns, and on his heads a blasphemous name. Now, I'll remind you that this beast represents all the nations, or the United Nations, and it's for this reason that some insist that the 7 heads actually represent Babylon, Persia, Greece, Turkey, Assyria, Egypt, and Rome. If so, well, then the 7 heads of the beast could potentially also represent these 7 empires. Not only that, but these 7 heads, according to John, contain 10 horns with 10 crowns. And then the crowns clue us into the idea that these are 10 kingdoms that come from the 7 empires, which then probably include Britain, France, Spain, Italy, Germany, Greece, Turkey, Syria, Egypt, Iraq, and Iran. So again, we see then that this beast represents the kingdoms of the world. At the same time, we must not fail to realize that John's vision shifts from a beast with 7 heads to a single world leader who will be empowered by the dragon. Here's how John puts it in Revelation 13. Again, he declares, "Now the beast which I saw was like a leopard, his feet were like the feet of a bear, and his mouth like the mouth of a lion. The dragon gave him his power, his throne, and great authority." This beast, which was initially depicted as having 7 heads and 10 crowns, well, it's now being described as a single world ruler who's given, a throne and great authority. And if you continue to read through the rest of this chapter, you'll soon see that this beast actually is a representation of the Antichrist. So it's initially depicted as the kingdoms of the world, or the United Nations of the world, and then moves into the authority of this single world leader. And we know that this world leader is the Antichrist. It's also interesting to note that according to John, the dragon is the one who provides the beast with power. Now, we know that the dragon actually is a representation of Satan, but in this context, speaking of world governments and United Nations, I can't help but to wonder, does the dragon mentioned here by John actually represent China? If so, then are the wings of the statue that stands there in the front of the UN building in New York City, are they the wings of eagles representing America maybe? Or are they actually dragon's wings that could represent China? Well, either way, this statue does appear to have attributes that closely resemble the beast found here in Revelation 13. And while I can't say for certain, that the people there at the UN actually understand this, what I do know is that the world is currently being prepared for the rise of the Antichrist, and you better believe that the UN is helping. And as we consider how the UN has introduced this statue as a symbol of international peace and security, we must not fail to realize that this is precisely the message that the leaders of the world will present as the charismatic character known as the Antichrist rises to power. At the same time, though, I can't help but to remember the warning that Paul presents in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. It's there where he declares, "Concerning the times and the seasons, brethren, you have no need that I should write to you, for you yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord so comes as a thief in the night. For when they say, peace and safety, then sudden destruction comes upon them as labor pains upon a pregnant woman, and they shall not escape." Wow. Before the day of judgment comes, the leaders of this world will present this political promise of peace and safety, peace and security. Unfortunately, rather than fulfilling these political promises, sudden destruction will come upon the planet as the Antichrist rises to power. Paul then turns his attention to the church, and he assures the hearts of those who trust in Jesus by declaring, "But you, brethren, are not in darkness, so that this day should overtake you as a thief. You are all sons of light and sons of the day. We are not of the night nor of darkness. Therefore, let us not sleep as others do, but let us watch and be sober." Christian, listen, we can rejoice in knowing that the church is going to be raptured before this time of sudden destruction and tribulation. With that being the case, Paul encouraged every Christian to stay sober, to remain sober-minded so that we can stand guard against the globalists who are gearing up to persecute the church prior to the rise of the Antichrist. With all this being the case, I encourage you in closing to remember that we have entered into a time of demonic deception. And this demonic deception will result in the widespread apostasy that takes place prior to the rapture of the church. And it's for this reason that I continue to challenge every Christian. Let's seek the strength of our Savior so that we can become those believers who fight the good fight of faith and all for the glory of God.